Can you guess this vehicle by just the interior?
I would be lying if I said that I've always wanted Infiniti, because I haven't. But in the grand scheme of things, Infiniti plays a huge role in the people who want something really nice, but not exactly too expensive. And so for the last 20 years, Infiniti has truly struggled to kind of be relevant to the conversation in the likes of such car makers such as Lexus, BMW, and of course the big kahuna themselves, Mercedes. But Mercedes and Infiniti play a huge role in this tale of what happens when gets messy. What's up, guys? My name is Chris, and welcome to the Breakdown, where we talk about everything cars, news, and reviews. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. So, of course, I have to come up with these topics every single week, and I have to be a little ingenious and creative of how I come up with them. And so, it seems as though that the QX30 at one point or another was a fever dream of a car. It was kind of a great package, considering it was a lifted hatchback, but not too lifted. It was a sedan, but not too much of it. In addition to, it was kind of a wagon, almost a hybrid of all three. But what I'm getting at is that the QX30 was supposed to be targeted at young buyers entering into the luxury market. And while it seemed great on paper that Infiniti combined and joined forces with Mercedes, it would probably be one of the worst decisions that have ever happened to the company. And in this video, not only are we going to explore the QX30 and what it was, but the messiness behind it. So with that being said, stick around and stay tuned, because you are now watching The Breakdown. Alrighty, so if you are new to this channel, you probably have either ran across me or probably have never heard of me. More than likely the latter. So I typically offer historical context just before you get started, so don't get bored of me just yet. Just hear me out, let me tell the story. Getting into it, I won't be going too deep into Infiniti because I've already done videos about them. If you want to go check those out, feel free to do so. But this particular tale is about the QX30, so I hope that you can bear with me before I get to the point. So Infiniti obviously was started as the last one of the big Japanese three, which would be Acura, Lexus, and then Infiniti. Now, the Japanese, of course, always wanted to compete against the German manufacturers because in many people's eyes, brand perception is reality. And for a lot of people, the prestige of the German brands, both BMW and Mercedes, and to some degree Audi before their scandal back in the 80s, they were at the top of their game. And so Infiniti had been working really hard alongside many of the other Japanese manufacturers to get you people's coins out of your pocket. And so Infiniti would have a tough time for the latter part of the 90s up until the mid 2000s, which is kind of the golden era of Infiniti. And so between 2005 and 2010, we see a huge ebb and flow between Infiniti and their sales. Now that could be attributed to the G35, which a lot of people absolutely fan after, but most of it was typically because Infiniti hadn't really developed an SUV yet. And of course with Infiniti, there was the G lineup, the Q lineup, the M lineup, and they had to really kind of work themselves in a rebranding structure because after Carlos Ghosn's introduction into Nissan, things got a little crazy, and that was by no short of omission for Infiniti. And so when Infiniti eventually looked up close around 2008, 2010, when the global recession happened, Infiniti realized that they had their work cut out for them because for a long time, the Japanese manufacturers simply could not do what the Germans did, with the exception of Lexus. And so the brilliant idea by Carlos Ghosn, which if you don't know who he is, you will by the end of the story. He was the CEO of Nissan and kind of the working product between Renault and Nissan and Mitsubishi. Now that partnership had been in place since 1999, and of course, being the CEO, people are looking for you to fix not just the Nissan brand, but also the Infiniti brand. And so being as ambitious as he was, he decided instead of you can't beat him, you might as well join him. He and Dieter Dechi, which I can't say that name wrong for all of my German audience members out there, please forgive me, I can't really say it right. Can't pronounce right. But him and Dieter would eventually join forces, which would create the Daimler Nissan Renault Alliance partnership. Now, this partnership back in 2010 was supposed to be a critical moment for Infiniti because it was supposed to represent that basically Mercedes got something and Nissan got something and Renault got something, and everybody kind of won out the deal, especially as all three brands were really trying to figure out their finances post recession of 2008. Now, oh Carlos, Oh, Carlos. So Carlos Ghosn is kind of a problematic theory in all of this. So between Daimler and Renault and Nissan, they essentially decided to exchange some hardware and some software. And preliminarily, Mercedes-Benz did not let Nissan touch any of their products. They actually gave them the Smart brand first before they entered into the Infiniti brand. And so the agreement was that they were supposed to roll out a series of products that was supposed to cater to the younger market. As we know, around 2013, the boom of millennial and Gen Zers, for whatever reason, seemed to happen to hit these car makers like we didn't have any money in the first place. And so, of course, Infiniti and Mercedes were working together to partner to roll out a lot of vehicles that would appeal to these different markets, as the young buyers are always kind of the fruit of their labor. Here's where it gets complicated. So the QX30 is a very small vehicle, and the QX30 would not be on the forefront of anybody's mind for a couple of years. Now, 2013 is when we begin to see the rollout of the CLA, and kind of the first time we see Mercedes being very intentional about hitting the demographic of the young buyers, as well as we also begin to see the BMW X1 and the Audi Q3 all roll out because the Germans knew who was willing to spend the money. Now, the QX30 is a joint venture between Daimler and, of course, Nissan. And the idea was that Nissan was going to take a few elements from Mercedes, which would essentially be badge engineering, and you've seen it before. Essentially roll out, which would be the fraternal twin of the GLA 250. And of course, like I said, with the GLA was supposed to be the lifted hatchback of the CLA coupe-like sedan. Now, here's where it gets chaotic. So between 2010 and 2016, before the rollout, Carlos was very ambitious. He wanted 700,000 units for Infiniti to take up 10% of the world market. I don't know why he thought that was a good idea, but he was ambitious, and particularly because he knew Nissan was on that ass. And because of that, this would be the love child of Mercedes and Infiniti. Now, here's the thing. Between its rollout of 2016 and 2019, the QX30 was confusing at best. When it was initially debuted back in 2015, people were excited. This would be the first time that we would see a small subcompact crossover from Infiniti, as they had only had things like the QX60 and the QX50 and the 55 and I believe the QX80. And so initially it was something that people were excited about because it was the first time that you could get a $30,000 Infiniti. If you wanted to bump it up, you could get it up to $40,000, but nonetheless you got the same level of influence of the German brands, but in a Japanese package. And so people were pretty excited. Here's where the problems began. So between 2016 and 2019, the Infiniti gives a bit of impression of cosplay. So at launch, it initially came with a 2-liter turbocharged engine, which was derived from Mercedes, which gave you about 208 horsepower, and came with a 7-speed dual clutch automatic transmission, and essentially could be had with front wheel drive or all wheel drive. Now, originally there was some level of confusion between the two models because there was the Q30 and the QX30, because the Q30 is based off in Europe. Now, this entire venture was an attempt to expand markets from that 700,000 so that Infiniti could try to expound and gain market share. Now, Carlos's intent was to touch the European markets, which I speculate was because he had already had a relationship with Renault, so he already better understood those markets. But he knew that the Infiniti brand did not do well in the European and Chinese markets, so he decided he was going to focus in on that. Now, the other thing is this. While Carlos really tried to focus his efforts on getting Infiniti out there to the masses, unfortunately the Mercedes-Benz GLA just sold better. And according to the sales data, this Mercedes-Benz GLA in comparison to the Infiniti QX30 just sold 3-1. And in this partnership, the entire point was that Mercedes was supposed to get something out the deal. Howsoever, throughout the entire process, both manufacturing and sales production, Nissan didn't hold up their end of the bargain. So for Daimler-Benz, it was an entire headache. And we had seen something similar with Daimler Chrysler, and I don't know why Mercedes always does this. They pick the little ragamuffins to help. They pick up the little ragamuffins that they deem as not superior to them and try to work them up. I don't know what Mercedes gets out of those deals, but I digress. And so in the entire synopsis of what happened, Infiniti essentially struggled to sell. Now, on paper, it was a really good deal, and it was supposed to be something that people could get into a Mercedes without necessarily the Mercedes badging. Fast forward into 2018, and Carlos Ghosn would get into a bit of trouble for underreporting his compensation and would essentially be stopped at the airport once he landed from Lebanon and essentially arrested. Now, this is by no surprise a coincidence because Carlos Ghosn had quite a few troubling issues at Nissan. He speculates that they was plotting against him, but we all know when it comes to big business and C-suite executives, you never really know exactly what happened. But I will say this, is that the QX30 was supposed to be something that Mercedes saw as an investment for them because they were supposed to roll out several other products after that. However, shortly after Carlos Ghosn was arrested, Mercedes would indeed cut their ties with Nissan as they didn't see it as profitable. And the new CEO around 2019, shortly thereafter, would be a little disinterested in Infiniti and Nissan and what they had to offer for the sake of cost cutting. And so the partnership would end around 2019. In terms of the QX30, what exactly happened? So the big thing is that with the QX30, in addition to a partnership with Mercedes, which was a terrible idea in my opinion, the Infiniti brand struggles because they don't actually put the marketing and the quality into what they're trying to sell. And unfortunately, being tied to Nissan doesn't really help their case. And unlike Mercedes-Benz and unlike BMW, who are their own standalone brands, as opposed to something like a Lexus and a Toyota or a Chevy and a Cadillac, there is no subsequent brand for those German manufacturers. So they can afford to create things in terms of perfect engineering, in terms of perfect quality in their eyes anyway. And it is something that Infiniti fails to do because they still have the Nissan brand, which is their mass value brand. The other thing that happened is simply just bad timing. The QX30, when it initially launched, was really exciting because it was a way for younger audiences to be able to get into a compact luxury car. But more importantly, this was around the time we had just seen a recession. And so for many young buyers, they were just on their way up. But unfortunately, the GLA kind of stole its shine because the GLA was more attractive, and being the same car, for a lot of people, they didn't really see the value proposition. In addition to the value proposition, the other thing is that the QX30 was never really marketed. I don't really remember much happening with the QX30. I remember the Q50 being a big deal, and I remember the QX60 being a big deal, and just recently the QX80 being a big deal, but I don't really remember the QX30 being a big deal. Mercedes had an entire headache working with Nissan, and unfortunately the brand association with Infiniti, being that Nissan is tied to Infiniti, really hurt the idea that this could have been a viable option for younger buyers. Given all of these things, the QX30 was supposed to be the perfect car for people who were looking for a good value proposition. But like Acura, like Lincoln, like Cadillac, which is absolutely crazy to say, but those car companies really struggle to make good quality products because the brand prestige simply is not there. But with that being said, you guys leave me a comment below and let me know if you remember the QX30 and if you've ever driven one, because I don't know too many people that have driven one, and if it's something that you would consider down the road if in fact Infiniti decided they wanted to bring it up. But with that being said, thanks for sticking around because I can be a little long-winded, and until the next video, I will see you guys later.